Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your host for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Miki Speer. Author, musician, and talk show host, Miki Speer was 13 years old when her mother passed away from cancer. For the better part of a decade, she ran away from her grief as she tried to convince herself she didn't need to go there. Miki now combines her passions into creating free grief resources she wished she had right after her mom passed. You can find her free grief workbook, My Heart Still Remembers, on her website, along with her hit song, See Me. You can catch Miki weekly on her Facebook Live show called The Healing Half, 30 Minutes of Growth, every Tuesday night that features musicians and speakers that offer insight and hope. Miki, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, Miki, let's go back in time. What was it like for you as a 13-year-old teen? And what was going on that made you decide to seek counseling?
Oh, man. So when everyone hears cancer, I think they assume, oh, you had these really great, deep conversations with your mom, and you must have been really prepared for it. And I can just tell you, it still felt like a sudden death in the sense that as a family, we never assumed she was going to die. We just had faith that she was going to be okay. And we never had any talk about what if. And so when we got the call, I'm very tall. You can't see this now, but I'm 6'4". So we just won state basketball for the 7th grade tournament. And we're walking out to the parking lot, and my dad gets a call from an aunt who was staying with us to help my mom, saying we had to rush her to the hospital. It's not good. And at that point, we sprinted to the hospital, and by the time we got there, she was so high on drugs that they're just trying to maintain living, basically. She was gone. And so it's not like we had these deep goodbyes or anything really that I think everyone associates with cancer. So kind of after that, I was just in shock. I wanted to be a normal 13-year-old. I got sick, as I think a lot of people do after a really stressful event. I got pneumonia really badly. So I kind of took a couple weeks off of school, went back, and I just was very much, I'm fine. We're going to be fine. I'm a normal 13-year-old. And it wasn't until you kind of mentioned what changed. It wasn't until I was crying at the drop of a hat in college. The second my coach would yell at me because I played volleyball, or the second I was just overwhelmed with maybe having a bad grade. And by bad grade, I mean like an A- because I'm way too hard on myself. All these things, I would just start sobbing. And as an 18, 19-year-old, that's not very cool or professional, or it was so embarrassing. So eventually I went to the counselor at this college that I was at, and I said, I think I've got a crying problem. I think I've got a disorder. I could use some tear stops, whatever it is. And they kind of asked me my history, and within a minute, they were like, you don't have a crying disorder. You have unresolved grief. And that was kind of the first time I realized I can't keep avoiding it. I can't keep pretending I'm normal, and I can't keep pretending that I'm fine.
Wow, a long journey to get there. And kudos to your counselor for recognizing that there's unresolved grief there.
So I have a question. At that time in your, so as you're discovering this, what was the process from that point for you? How did you learn to go there? And what was helpful? What were the challenges? What was that experience for you?
Yeah. So that conversation probably happened about my sophomore year in college because I got through freshman year and I was like, I can't keep doing this. And so I wish I could say, oh, it just happened right away and I had this great thing. But it took probably 5 years from like that start to like now, which is probably about that time frame well, I just dated myself. I'm way older than 5 years out of college, so I'm just pretending to be young at this point. But it took a long time. I think the first step for me in counseling was just acknowledging that it was a massive loss and that it was a trauma and that I shouldn't be fine after that and that it's okay to kind of own that title of trauma, which I don't think I wanted to. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to just pretend I was fine. But really it started with, how is your day going? What's stressing you out? It wasn't even grief related. It was just beginning to talk. And then eventually, once I got kind of more comfortable with crying in front of somebody, and that's when we started to say, okay, let's talk about your mom. Let's talk about the journey. What forgiveness needs to happen? And it still took a long time, I would say years, before I really started to process that. And the kind of the aha moment that I had was that I'm healthier, I'm happier, and I'm a better wife, friend, everything when I am connected with my past. And when I let that flow, so but my past and my present flow together, and I let those memories come up and I share them, that's when I was able to kind of project onto others that this might help them. That was my moment. For whatever reason, it didn't matter if my life was in shambles, but the fact that it affected other people that I loved was kind of my, okay, I can let my mom into my story. And I need to. And it's been such an absolute 180 turn since that moment.
Yeah. When you were talking, and I'm not to take us way off kilter, but it's interesting. I was actually reading this morning a curriculum that a friend of mine had written, and it's called Lessons from Lions, and it's on the Lion King, basically. And he wrote this for kids to watch the Lion King and then talk about the experience of losing a parent, running away from that for a period of time, and realizing I can't live that way. I have to somehow connect myself back with my past. So as you were saying that, I was picturing this whole story of kind of how that works, because I think in a lot of ways, grief is something that we carry with us through our lives. It's not it's not one thing that we're pinpointing. It's a lot of things, and it's somehow even part of who we are and who we're becoming as a person, and we can't separate ourselves from that. I think
you can't. Oh, I love that. I want to look up Lessons from Lions because I think that's beautiful.
Check it out. Yeah.
And the Lion King was actually, throughout that dark period where I pretended I was fine, there were always those little things that would touch a nerve, and I'd have to like run to the bathroom and try and like collect myself. And the Lion King was always one of them where I was just like, I cannot get through this movie because it's so accurate and it's so hard, and you are Simba in those moments, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So I can't wait to connect and read that too. So thank you for sharing.
You had said something very interesting. You said that you had to accept that grief, the death of your mom, was really a traumatic event. When still in society, so many people who haven't experienced a death loss still believe that with time, the hurt will go away, you'll heal, you'll forget, you'll move on, and that it's just a natural, process of getting over it. So thank you for pointing that out. I think it's really important that we do acknowledge a death loss truly is a traumatic event and needs to be understood and accepted as such.
Absolutely. And I think in our culture, we have a weird comparison problem, where we hear other people have traumas and we hear other people have bad things, and we say, wow, that is so extreme, that's so bad, I can't own that trauma title either. Like if that person had trauma, I'm not going to even put myself on that map because I feel like I'm so inferior compared to their struggles.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I really went through, where I was like, there's people who have it so much worse than I do. You know, I still had a dad. I didn't have to wonder where my next meal was coming from. Like all these boxes were still checked. And so I felt unqualified to call it a trauma because there were people who dealt with so much more. And so you're so right. We are just so afraid to give ourselves some compassion. And we need that as a country, I think, as a whole, to just own that a lot of people can have a lot of hurt, even if someone out there has it worse than you.
Our big line is be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and with that, how many people are living with grief and they don't even know that's what it is? So that's another issue that, you know, at some point I think we become so disconnected from maybe the things that happened in our past that we're behaving in ways now and we don't relate our tears, our temper, you know, our restlessness in the night. We don't see the connection between that and the traumas we've experienced in our past. I think there's so many people living that way. It's one of the reasons why I have a passion for this particular field, because it's not just a few people. I do this pretty much on a regular basis. If I'm out in public, every third person I pass, I say to myself in my head, that person is going through something really difficult. Right? Because it reminds me that even though on Facebook everyone's happy, everything's working out, right? That's not the reality. That all of us are carrying, you know, wounds and hurts and things in our lives. So, you know, being able to somehow deal with that. So I do have another question for you, and that is, at what point did you kind of make the shift and said, you know what, I'm going to start helping others? Like I want to share this with others, and it sounds like you're almost in a life path that where you're sort of in this grief thing, right? So it's sort of had a real impact there. But I'm curious about that and where you see yourself now.
Absolutely. So I would say about 2 years ago, I really started. So I do music, and that's been such a blast. But as with anybody who kind of starts in their bedroom writing their songs, and then it's a big process to tell the world and to share your soul in that way, especially if you're not a very talented guitar player or all the things we tell ourselves with why we shouldn't move forward with something. And so about 2 years ago, I realized I want to start sharing. I want to start sharing my art. I want to start putting that out there. And at the same time as me kind of coming to terms with wanting to be a public artist, I was also noticing in my own grief journey these lessons that I was learning, and I was just like having these aha moments all the time. And I was just like, man, we need to talk about this. People need to know. And I wish with all my heart no one else ever in the history of the world will have to lose a mom to cancer when they're a teenager. I wish I could just stop that from ever happening, but I know it won't unless something big happens as far as a cure goes. And so I was like, this is happening. People are dying. Kids are losing parents still. And I have these aha moments. I have this story. I have this journey. And I would love to share that with other people because I clearly hadn't really heard it or wasn't open to hearing it when I was that age. And I was like, maybe if something was said in a different way or was in a different format or something, maybe something would have actually gotten through to me rather than people just taking me at face value when I said, I'm fine. And then saying, oh, she said she's fine. Okay.
Right.
And kind of walking away at that point. So about 2 years ago is when I kind of began like, I love music. I love writing. I also love helping people. Like, let's do this. And so the show, The Healing Half, really started when quarantine started because all open mics, all music venues, that all got shut down. But I still wanted to share. And then I kind of realized this is a really cool opportunity to go beyond music. Because I love music, but it's much bigger than that. Yeah. And so quarantine was really the fire that got The Healing Half going because it's online, just like this show. People can watch it anytime. And there's something so powerful about just taking advantage of the online space rather than assuming you have to be in person to do it, which is why I love partnering with you guys because you do such great online work.
Thank you so much. I want to hear more about your grief workbook, My Heart Still Remembers. We took a look at it, and I have to say, I believe I can speak for the both of us. We were both very impressed.
Oh, thank you so much. So, kind of knowing that the show was going to be coming up, I wanted to have something I could kind of give to people as like a little gift for saying, hey, thanks for watching my show. It's free. And I thought, what would I really have needed help with? And then I kind of came to the conclusion I needed a guided process. I could hear things, whatever, but I needed, because I'm a writer, I needed to write something down and actually have like this journey. And that's where the book came from. It's just like, okay, what's my journey? Now that I've gone through counseling, still going, and done all this work, when I feel driftless, when I feel grief bubbling up, what do I do with it? And so I wanted to share my little solution that I just assumed everybody else had. And then I told somebody about it, and they said, I've never heard that at all. I was like, oh, okay. So then it just walks through the 3 stages that I have memorized now. And that's kind of the hope, is eventually you remember, okay, step 1, this, step 2, that, step 3. And you can do that whether you're at the grocery store or in the car. But of course, I love the workbook too. And I just realized when it came to grief, it's so nice just to set some time aside to visualize that person, remember qualities about them that are tucked away in our memory. They're there, but we don't really tap into them a lot. But it feels so good to remember what your grandpa smelled like. And it feels so good to remember what it felt like to hug your mom. And that was something I felt like we don't talk about a ton. So I wanted step 1 to be, let's visualize it. Let's bring them back. Let's feel it. Let's feel that presence again, because it's there. And then step 2 was talking about legacy, and where the My Heart Still Remembers goes a little off to the side than what I've seen elsewhere, is I wanted to talk about the forgiveness component and the fact that our loved ones are not perfect. And by us putting them on this like perfect angel pedestal, we don't give ourselves a lot of grace to process any unresolved emotions. And we also don't give ourselves a lot of grace to not be perfect ourselves. Because if my mom is the perfect angel, what does that mean for me when I'm not a perfect angel? Will people be sad if I die? All the questions that I had. And so I thought it was so important to remember we are in charge of their legacy. The positives, the things that my mom was so good at, can continue through me, and taking time to actually name those and put it on the calendar is so much more powerful than just hoping I get around to it eventually. And then vice versa, what would my mom like to die with her? You know, that was something that was a huge shift for me, because my mom wasn't perfect. And I know as women, a lot of us have body image issues. And I remember growing up with her, you know, pinching herself and saying, oh, if only I could just lose this, and I can't go out yet, I'm not ready. And things that I know I don't want to continue, but I see in myself a lot. And I'm like, oh, this is a bad legacy. This is something, if I wanted to stop, I need to time out and do that. So that was kind of the phase 2. And then the last step, which is always so good with any loss, is just trying to find the silver lining, trying to find the gratitude through it. It's being like, what am I grateful for? What can I carry with me? What did I learn from them? What will always be part of my life because of them? And just kind of tying it nice together in those 3 little stages. So that's My Heart Still Remembers. I hope anybody who's interested goes and grabs their free copy from my website. And if you wanted like a physical book, it's available to be shipped on Amazon Prime too.
Wonderful. And we will have your website as a link on all of our links.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about your song, See Me.
Yes. So one of the songs that I wrote, and it's dedicated to anybody who has lost anyone. So it doesn't have a specific person in mind, but I wrote it for my mother-in-law after my brother-in-law passed away from suicide at 19. We had no idea he was even struggling with depression. And anyone in that situation would be completely devastated. And I realized my mother-in-law and the whole family was just completely decimated. And I wanted to write something, I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what to say. Who hasn't been there? Even though I've been through grief, I still didn't know what to say, because this was my first suicide that I had ever dealt with. And I was like, okay, trying to put myself in her shoes, what would I like to hear? And in that moment, I just had this weird sense come to me of just like, remind her that Brendan's not gone forever. He's around. You'll see his spirit. You'll see him in these things. And this is also the same time that I was coming to terms with my mom's around, and I see her all the time, and I'm going to embrace that. So I decided to write a song just reminding anybody who's lost that just look up. Your loved one is around you, and they're sending you little messages all the time, fingerprints, like I like to say. You'll see them in the morning. You'll see them, in the wind and the leaves, and whatever reminds you of them. Embrace those moments, because it's a beautiful thing when we stop doing what I did for a better decade and pushing those reminders out. So that's what the song is, and it just took off of my little album that I put out. I didn't even think much of it, but everybody kept coming back and saying, "See me, see me, see me," was the one they liked. And I was like, "Really? That one? Not these other ones I spent a lot of time on too," which is okay, which is totally fine. And that's just solidifying again why I want to go the grief direction, because we all need help. I still need help, which is why I love leaning on other resources too, not just my own that I put out. So that's why I put out See Me, and I wanted to make sure, especially with the older generation, Spotify might not be as clear on how to use. So if they head to my website, they can just download this, like the MP3 file, to their computer. That way they have it, they can keep it on their computer, or they could email that file out to somebody who needs it. So that's my hope, is they can just spread to whoever needs to hear a little bit of encouragement that their loved one is not gone forever.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Well, Miki, we actually are running short on time, but
Yeah.
A lot of the folks who listen to our program like to connect with our guests. And if there's some way folks could connect with you, how would they do that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So Fran mentioned a couple of times my website is going to be the best place to go. On there, you'll have my blog, you'll have my music, my free My Heart Still Remembers. So just head to mikispeer.com and feel free to send me a message. I love meeting fans. I love engaging and hearing stories. So please join me on the Healing Half too. It's every Tuesday night. Really looking forward to connecting with anybody who is interested.
Great.
Miki, thank you so much. We want to thank you for being a guest here at Let's Talk Death, and for sharing your journey and the story behind your work, your book, and your song.
Oh, my absolute honor. Thank you all so much for having me, and for all the good that you guys are doing. It's an amazing, amazing podcast and organization.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Miki. And thank you to all those who are joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support for young adults called Actively Moving Forward.
Make sure to sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk Death.